Professor Huchtamo. So welcome to the brave ones. Rain in Los Angeles means basically that everything stops. And I appreciate those of you who have brought your physical bodies here. And for those of you online, hello. Victoria Vesna, I chair the Department of Design Media Arts. And I feel really strongly that we need to introduce sound, audio, noise, soundscapes, environmental sound into our program. So this series was meant to give us a kind of a broad overview, and we've invited people from China and Mexico and LA, and even got a kind of a broad survey of the US scene. Tonight I have the pleasure to introduce Goran Vejvoda, who's an artist based in Paris and who I have known for 20 years. I mean, it just gives away our ages, right? But I was really pleased to hear something that I never actually computed until just a few minutes ago, that when he was moving to Paris from Belgrade, where we met, he helped and we collaborated on a piece which was in a way a beginning for his own looking and experimenting into new media and media arts. And then we parted ways, and he ended up in Paris and I ended up in LA. He was very, very active in the experimental art and music scene in Belgrade, and worked with various pop and experimental bands, and he brought a lot of contemporary European artists into the scene there, and then vice versa, and then expanded out and released several solo albums under a Japanese label, of all labels. You'll explain that one. Fruit, Cloud, and Harmony. And he worked with a Yugoslav composer who some of you may be familiar with, who was very well known in Brazil, he was called Suba there. His full name was Mitar Subotic, and he unfortunately passed away. But if you don't know his work, it's really fabulous, and they worked together on that. Goran also published a book that was devoted to Brian Eno, and is currently preparing a compendium on sound art and starting to teach it. He's also been exhibiting, working with physical space and visualization, even working with contemporary dance and opera, and just really being available to whatever comes up to figure out ways where he can interrupt it with his own ways of dealing with the space and how to introduce sound in it. So I could go on, but I let him continue from this point on, and he asked me to warn you that part of his audio presentation may be a cough here and there, because he's actually bringing a cold, a Parisian cold to us, and I hope you're not contagious. Or if you are, I hope it's only with ideas.
Bird flu.
Bird flu. Anyway, give a warm welcome to Goran.
Thanks. Okay, so the mic is working?
Yeah.
Okay. So, hi everyone. It's nice to be here in rainy LA. And as Victoria said, it's good and to be courageous to come out here. And hello to the streaming crowd who's out there as well. So, well, we're going to start off this presentation with just a few audio snippets and visual snippets. I will just show them to you before without saying anything, and then I'll tell you something about it, okay? So if the technology works, and do we have, just to be sure with the volume that their heads don't blow away? Okay, I'll just try, okay, and see what happens. to play the DVD. Okay, that was one thing. Yeah, so if you can switch to the DVD here, please.
We don't need to visually.
Yeah.
Welcome to Silent Sound Systems, Subliminal CD. Mommy and I are...
Sorry, we got a little... Okay, so it's this one here. Okay, great. No, you need to double click on it. Yes. Okay, that's right. Okay. Where's the volume? Okay, so that was the introduction. What I would suggest is, maybe we can do that afterwards, but it's to start with a question. If anybody could say that the two things that we just saw, if you know from what country it comes from, or where it was done, or who did it, and how. But you can think about it for an hour and a half. And we'll get back to that. Okay, so I'm going to try and make this lecture sort of two-part, two ways. First, an overview of various directions of audio arts in Europe today, and the second part, a quicker part, about what I do myself, if we have time, if I don't spill over. So the first part is going to be my general remarks on certain problematics and initiatives, which will lead me to a non-exhaustive list of works and artists who are in one way or another connected to Europe. And for those who want to know more, I will happily share my chaotic audio arts internet bookmarks at the end. So those who have Macs, I can leave them on a server here, or whoever wants them. There's quite a few out there. So you will excuse the shortcuts, and foremost, as you try to be exhaustive at the end of the day, you see basically that you would need an army of people to keep track and update all the things that are going on. That's something that when I was watching the stream that Ken Fields did here, I was thinking, because he works in China, obviously, I was a bit jealous of him because he was talking about that he had students doing this and students doing that, and I said, well, maybe he could send some over to me, you know, if he had more students. And so to keep track of all of this information, I'll get back to that, is I think it's one of the fundamental problems today in a lot of areas, but in this area as well. So when I was talking with my friend who's an artist called Ramuncio Mata, he summoned something quite well, which he said we need to make a soundation, like as in foundation, because there's not enough places that are really devoted to sound. So soundation, and I really like that word. So that's why I'm showing it. I'm promoting the word here. And so I'm going to start with a few open-ended thoughts. Some of them might seem easy, superficial, pretentious, but I prefer to call them daring or questioning. These may apply to any of the artists or categories that I might mention further. So, in the academic sphere, where visions are well established, there's loads of books and articles out there that will present in detail most of the background and substrata on which I'm building upon. Some of you have probably read or seen part of this documentation, but for those who need more info, I'll be glad as well to help them out. So the human species sort of, when humans specialize, they're great at it. They climb the highest and most exciting spots, but very often in that process they seem to lose some of the threads that got them there in the first place. So we're always in the sound domain. So we're in an interesting point in time for sound activities within the cultural field and the contemporary art. Locomotive is attaching slowly a major carriage, hopefully, and finally to the rest of the train. So you can imagine what carriage that locomotive is trying to catch up with. And a broader consideration, like any other field, the art world needs new blood to continue expanding, communicating, researching, striving, and ultimately selling. Okay? So my next slide is this. So I will not necessarily explain what the slides are, because if somebody wants to know what they are, because I use them as a backdrop, just as a sound backdrop, so people can, listen to what I'm saying, and they can look at the slide, and then they can make their own film up, the way they can make their own sound. Okay. So we're in the history of sound, and the history of sound art goes way back when, even though there have been major exhibits these last 10 years in prestigious locations. There was one not long ago here, which was called Visual Music, that I unfortunately didn't see, but I got the big catalog, which is quite nice. And there were other exhibits, like the Sonic Boom exhibit at the Hayward Gallery in London. There was the Frequenzen show at the Schön in Frankfurt. There were quite a few major exhibits in prestigious locations. So the sound and audio content in regular galleries and other art spaces wasn't as natural a transition as the video or photography, for instance. I have heard from various specialized people in England who were approached by none less famous publishers to do major writing on sound topics, but that never happened. So people were asked to do like major works by big publishers, and they were, they really got into the thing and they were really happy, and all of a sudden, they were going through the motions and everything, and then the publishers called back and they said, well, finally this subject doesn't really interest us at the end of the day. We thought maybe, but we prefer to do books or video or whatever kind of other stuff. And then on the other hand, if you take a popular, good quality and cheap and price publisher like Tashkent, that you probably know of, who recently brought out its compilation type book, Art Now Volume 2, you will not find many sound-oriented artists in there, or very, very, very few. I think there's only Christian Markley who's in there, and who was already in the, I think he was already in the first one. So that gives you a perspective where we're standing with the sound thing. You know, it's super hype, it's super cool, it's super tech, it's super this, it's super that, but then at the end of the day, there's no, like, or at least what I feel, there's no finality, or at least there's not a logical stream like with all the other components of the art field as it is now. So this is changing, but slowly. Many initiatives worldwide participate in this slow recognizing and incorporating process for sound to be part of the art world, not as a gimmick, but a consistent building block. The awareness of sound in the contemporary art world is a good thing, and including and considering sound-based works into their agendas, organizations will benefit considerably. But the lack of knowledge in this field within the visual art community is a major hurdle that needs to be overcome. And that's a big problem. And that's why I'm happy when Victoria said in the beginning that places like UCLA and other places need to incorporate sound in a much more specific and profound way. So the problem is very often situated on the more or less classic history of art basis. So the curators, journalists, publishers, professors usually don't know how to deal with this topic, that they very often confuse with the musical tradition. And seen from that perspective, understanding sound becomes a problem, because you have your whole strata and your whole strategy in your head, which is fine-tuned and thinking in one way, and all of a sudden you have this paradigm which comes along, which is sound, and you don't know how it fits. You don't know how to deal with it. It slips through your hands all the time. So that's quite a problem. And I remember an anecdote a few years back of a curator who in Paris who worked for like 5 or 6 years to grasp the fundamentals of sound or sound art, in order to prepare a major audio exhibit, and the end result was quite poor for people who are in this field. For the people who are outside the field, obviously they're discovering what's happening. So they are always in awe of a new thing. But if you're inside the field like for 10 or 15 years or even longer, some people, and you see this kind of stuff, you say there's something wrong. This wasn't done properly, or it was done superficially. And when you see the amount of time that was put into it, you don't necessarily see how that functions. Okay, so I'm going to change my slide here. Ooh, here comes a man playing the guitar. Okay, so I might get out of the theory a bit and get into the concrete here. So does anybody know this man? Yeah. This was not so long ago in Paris at the Museum of Modern Art that just reopened in a very big space. It's called the Raoul Dufy space, because Raoul Dufy did all the paintings around. And so the picture that you saw before, this picture is, well, he's obviously standing at the end where the microphone is. It was actually it was like a concert sound installation, and I thought it was quite interesting because he put this line of speakers. You can't actually see how many there are, but I think there were about 6 in a line. And this place is big, is very big. So he had his amp with the little red lights at the end, and he had his guitar, and he had like a massive pedal board or whatever, and then he was singing his Brazilian stuff, because he's very, as you probably know, he's very acquainted with Brazilian music and fluent in Portuguese and so forth. And then he would just sing, and I do even have a little, I just remembered I have a QuickTime of this. So if you give me a second, get out of my technology stuff here. Ooh. Okay, where's Ardo Lindsay? Here he is. Okay, here we go.
Não me deixa à vontade, deixa eu seguir o ilê, o charme da liberdade. Deixa eu seguir o ilê, o charme da liberdade. Quem joga a ladeira e o todo é a coisa mais linda que se vê. É o ilê, o mais belo dos dez sou eu. Bata no peito mais forte, diga, eu sou eu. Para me ver que não me deixa à vontade. Não me pegue não me deixa à vontade. Deixa eu seguir o ilê, o charme da liberdade. Deixa eu seguir o ilê, o charme da liberdade. Quem é que sobe a ladeira do Polo Sul? É a coisa mais linda de se ver, é o Ilê, mais belo dos belos. Sou eu, bata no peito mais forte, chega, eu sou o Ilê. Mas não me pegue não me deixa à vontade. Não me pegue não me deixa à vontade. Deixa eu seguir o ilê, o charme da liberdade. Deixa eu seguir o ilê, o charme da liberdade.
Okay, so that was Arto playing in Paris, and actually he was, in this bit, he didn't go crazy on his guitar, but there were some bits where he would just totally whack out, and he would just, you know, go for it, and it would just go. Let me just see if I have a bit of that. Sound is traveling through these speakers as he's playing. It's going through the space.
If I gave my love.
Okay, I can leave you this if you want to look at it. Okay, so boom, 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 and back to slideshow. Whoops, there we are. That's him. Okay, so coming to the fundamental stuff of like these generalities, but that I think are very important. I'd like to carry on that topic a bit. So, be it individuals or organizations, the level of insight and know-how on this topic, on the sound topic, needs to be heightened to the point where artists and the potential organizers can speak a common language. An overall acceptance factor is that sound is now part of the digital arts, which is part good, but not only. Why? Well, because sound is a bit like an orphan roaming around. You just take it when you need it, squeeze it in with the rest. There is no specific distinction for sound in the media arts. I think that it should have a dedicated position and be taught as a subject by itself as to achieve a mature status so that it can bloom alone and reconnect with all forms on an equal basis, not just as spice, but as something substantial. I think that's really important because, whoops, sorry. As most of you know, who work in media arts and everything, sound is always like the last thing, you know, somebody grabs a CD or somebody needs to mix something in Pro Tools or he calls a friend to do this or that, and very often the sound content is quite poor or is undermixed or submixed, and it's not really there because it's the visuals that are really leading the sorry, I need to go and cough because it's really bad. Can you turn down the mic, please? Yeah. No, I had this really bad cold and it comes back all of a sudden and it just really itches really, really badly. And with talking, it's just like... For the video stream. Very good, so they can see me. Why did you stop? Yep. Okay. So we're back again. Yeah, well, oh, thanks a lot. That's very kind. You're saving me here. Well, as I said before, as Victoria mentioned in the introduction to one of the sessions here, and to this one as well, she would like to see this opening up to sound practice happen more consistently, and I'm hammering that in, and that really needs to be done. I just got back from Geneva, where I did a workshop. Thank you. Thank you. And speaking with the people and students there, I felt the same thing, that they were telling me about a future digital arts institute and how they were considering seriously getting a professor for sound, so that's great. Huh? Sorry? Huh? You don't have any sound? Oh, the cooking. Yeah, it's probably the Mac that's cooking. Mac's cook. So you're wondering what this is on the slideshow here. This is a poster by French designers called M&M, which are quite famous now, who've done covers for Bjork, but who do a lot of the design work for the Palais de Tokyo and a lot of other stuff. So they're really like cross-platform. They're all over the place. And this is an exhibit that just took place in Reims, which is the capital of Champagne, and it's called Video Killed the Video Star. Video Killed the Radio Star, I think, #2. And as you can see, for the people who are sitting farther away, they can see what this image represents. I don't know if you can see what it is. Do you see that it's a skull or no? Yeah? Okay. Have you got it? Okay, boom. So there are still very few places in the world that are dedicated from whatever angle to sound on a constant basis. So in no special order, the Sound Art Museum in Rome, the Audium in San Francisco, Diapason, and Engine 27. Engine 27, I don't think that it's still running, but it's in New York. Very interesting place where they had one of the rare places where they had a setup of surround sound where artists could come and really work with space and sound, which is not an obvious thing because we very often only work in stereo, which is not a bad thing, or working with mono as well is not a bad thing. But as we're in this super tech age, we get to hear about all these beautiful and great things, how this can be done and that can be done, but at the end of the day, you never actually get to do it. And there's no places, coming back to the soundation thing, we need to have places where people can really experiment and do research much further down the line not only like in the other places that I'm going to mention, the GRM in Paris, which is the Groupe de Recherche Musicale, and the IRCAM that you've probably all heard about. These places are, GRM is a smaller institution. IRCAM is quite a big institution, even though great things are done in these places and good work is done and interesting stuff is done. It's still, in a way, these are closed clubs where you can't go in, or you can, or if you have to have some sort of entrance way or pass to get in there. It's not something where where there's a momentum going, and where there's a place where people know that on a longer term they could probably benefit from a place like that. God, this is horrible. Okay, drink the tea. Yeah, I've been drinking tea since 1 hour. Okay. So, okay, here's the candy for the stream, guys. It's nice and red. Oh, peppermint tea. Okay, I've got everything. I got the whole pharmacy around me. So I was mentioning GRM, IRCAM in Paris. There was a place in Berlin that closed down, which was called the Klangkunstforum, dedicated to sound, but it closed. And some of these places are very specialized in one domain, others towards experimental music or radio. But, and another thing, very few, if any, were specifically designed buildings and spaces simply with sound in mind. IRCAM was designed with sound in mind. But GRM was a radio. So the guys who work at GRM, they use the studios from the radio. They're not designed in what we nowadays think of sound and the way that we can eventually see the forthcoming future. So we need to have people in Europe and all over the place that will start definitely, because the problem is with acoustics as well. You always get, when people are building, when they're doing buildings in architecture, you have acoustics, and the guy who does the acoustics, he comes in that there's not enough, that the room doesn't rumble, and that that the sound is nice, but that's about it basically, and it's thrown out. It's the people who think sound, who work on sound, they should be asked and be part of the building process in buildings, especially not only for sound buildings or foundations, but they should be there from the very start. Well, just to continue on what are the places that do deal with sound very, very quickly. Then you have bigger or smaller festival events, which are, you name it, endless variations of digital versus media arts with more of this and less of that, and some that have a strong sound art component, like the ARS Electronica in Linz in Austria, the Sonar in Barcelona in Spain, the Garage Festival in Stralsund in Germany, I don't know if I said that correctly, Villette Numérique in Paris, Volavox in Brussels, Belgium, Electro or Mutech in Montreal, Liquid Architecture in Melbourne, Australia, High Zero in Baltimore, Zeppelin in Barcelona, Sonic Arts in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, Exit in Créteil, France, Make Art Poitiers, a very small festival that just opened not long ago, which works with people, with the community, with the pure data community, and the people who do the writing, the software writing, because there's a whole, I won't go into that, but there are people who not only work with software, but there are more and more people who really want to build their software by themselves, because they've had enough, or asking a friend, can you do this for me, or some institution, and it just never happens. So they really go under the hood with the software, which I think is a really, really, really good thing. Then there's festival or a sort of event in Ljubljana, which is called Bit Shift. And now the defunct Het Apollo Huis, I don't know if I pronounced that right, in Eindhoven in Holland, which went on from 1980 to 2001. Okay. A bit of darkness, and then here comes the man. And then there's, in that whole line, there's the record labels, the radio stations, the podcasts, the internet, the magazines, the specialized stores, and concert venues. So let's dive into the ocean of sound, okay? Boom. So this is a few sentences here that might seem a bit weird, but I quite like them. So you can apply them to a couple of topics, but I apply them to sound. So we have arrived at confusion point. You will see there's some quotes that will come up, so that will be a bit clearer. I feel that I'm participating in disorder. Well, it's the general disorder that's happening all over the place, so it's happening in sound as well. And then this, like, sort of slogan, 130 minutes is the new 3 minutes. All the people who are in the music business know that 3 minutes is like the single, is like the reference thing. But now we're hitting the telephone generation, and now everything is going into this damn telephone. And the people who are, all of the corporate minds and the people who are thinking about how they're going to cram into that thing even more information for kids and families and whoever to buy. I saw a program the other day on French TV, and there was this like sort of young soul, French black soul singer, and she was there with the executive, and they were in this really super cool studio, and they were sitting there. And the guy was like humping and jumping because he came towards the camera and he said that she agreed. And then the journalist asked, but what did she agree to? And she agreed to actually squeeze her 3 minutes down already to 130 minutes. And she was saying that the song was still there and everything was still there and the atmosphere was still there. And so I thought that was like, it's a pivotal moment. So what's going to happen next is like, when the next machine comes out, how are we going to cut this down? And you know, what is the attention span? And that's a very important question, I think. But this deals as well not only with the music industry. This whole attitude, I think, deals with what's going on in general. That's why these two sentences before work. I think they work together. So as you see, we've gone from some numbers to some other numbers, and probably most of you know these numbers here better, or people who are in the sound art field know them very well. These are the famous 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence by John Cage. So we're still in the same exhibit that we were before with Arto Lindsay, the opening of the Museum of Modern Art in Paris. And this is the exhibit of Pierre Huyghe, who is going to do a 3-part exhibit on a massive scale. The second part is in the Tate in London, and it's called Celebration Park. So the only thing that he had in the exhibit was these big neon sentences that were all over the place, and with some automatic doors that were opening. And funnily enough, I took a picture of this because this was really related to sound, or to what could be called the phenomena of the history of sound, and it's become like a symbol, a bit like the 3 minutes in the industry. This is in the sound art world. The 433 of John Cage is like, you know, it's God is speaking, you know, sort of thing. So what was interesting, that he doesn't own this, which is a bit confusing as well. I mean, how can he own, you know, you can go on about this forever. How can he own, silence or 433 and so forth. So you can see the other sentence here, part of it. It was very, very big. So I'm going to go into my quote here, and I'll tell you afterwards who it was. It's from an interview. With whom do you feel contemporary today? Question. Answer. May I also add with what? We are facing an immense melting pot, even though we are always contemporary of something, of some kind of order clarified by history. We are today facing a misfire, and that's what interests me. I feel that I'm participating in this disorder. So that's where the sentence comes from. Question. Is this phenomenon of disorder recent? Answer. Apparently it is. It appeared at that moment where we have lost notions of ideology, coherence, and a clear direction, which doesn't make me feel as much contemporary with Boulez, Antonioni, Bill Viola, minimalism, or computers. This undifferentiated panorama constitutes my own everyday routine. Question. How do you evolve in this panorama? Answer. I work in various domains that don't correspond between each other. I like putting these domains in a relationship, a soundscape with computers, or answering to musique concrète, initial intentions with electronic sounds, or even mixing a concert piece with an installation. So this was Luc Ferrari, French composer and artist who died recently. A very important figure in music because he is somebody who I think corresponds quite well to this confusion point of where people don't understand how to actually grasp this sound phenomenon, as I said before. And he actually explains that the disorder and how he sort of dwells and functions in the disorder, and how he builds up in the disorder actually is his way of working. So that's quite interesting. So just to get out of the heavy stuff and into the easier stuff. So most of you know this building, I think, or you've seen it in pictures. This is the Beaubourg Center in Paris. And this was a big sort of banner on the building in 2005. So it's interesting. I'm interested as well of how the terminology, the music terminology or sound terminology is used in the art field, how it sort of feeds back. So anybody that's running through the streets of Paris and sees Africa Remix says, great, it's going to be a cool party. We're going to have a great time. And actually when you go and see the show and you think you're going to see some sound or some music, and there's nothing. There's absolutely not one single sound in there. Okay? And that's really big. So a close-up for those who didn't see it. And then, well, you have the same word, how the same word is used and reused in other contexts. So we're closer to the what I consider being the use of this word. So it was an exhibition at the Tate. So from one remix to another, you can make your choice in between the two. So I'm quoting this book, Max Neuhaus. The visual artists have been able to make marks on walls for thousands of years, of course, while we've been able really to capture sound only for about 40 years since the invention of audio tape. So the lag is understandable, but I'm always surprised by it all the same. For a primitive man living in the forest, his ears were a lot more important than his eyes. He could hear danger much farther away than he could see it. We still sense the size and nature of a space with our ears as well as our eyes, but our culture is so visual that we tend to forget about the oral side of things. This was in 1988. So this is a very good book for people who have read. So Max Neuhaus is really interesting because that's another sort of thing that's going on. He's American, but he lives in Capri in Italy. He's a major figure of sound art. One of the people who theorized as well, wrote a lot of interesting things. And that's another thing that sort of I'm really unhappy with. This kind of book is something that's got a lot of interesting stuff inside, but you can't get it. You can't find it on the internet. It's not being put into PDFs, so you have to photocopy it the good old way, and it's really a shame. Books like these should be really accessible to people everywhere. So he's a really good mix between the Anglo-American and European side. He's an international artist, but he's rooted into Europe. So a lot of the people that I'm talking about tonight, they are in some kind of way, they're all over the place. So they can be, you can see very often in biographies, born in Austria, lives in LA. It's just become such a normal thing, you know, that people are just, you know, they get out of one place and go into another place. So this whole thing of, you know, where is one? I was thinking about the Chinese students that Ken was talking about. So, you know, how do you get these things to work together? And how do you explain, like I was saying in the beginning, how do you know that the first guy that I played was from Portugal and the second guy that I played was from Holland? You know, how do you, does it matter at all? And why do we talk about these things? Or if it doesn't matter, let's forget about these things and let's not talk about anymore of who comes from where, especially in this field. So that's a domain of debate that needs to have a lot of thought gone into there, I think. So I'm going to quote first, a very short quote, and this is going to be a more of on a lighter side. The quote is, "It's not hype to travel." Okay, so here's the man. It's Karl Lagerfeld, as some of you know, and yeah, he lost a lot of weight. Yeah, because he wanted to wear Dior clothes. He wanted to get into Eddie Sliman's design. So he had to sort of deflate in order to get there. So that's another interesting phenomena as well that you have in this whole international process, which is helping as well get to confusion point, because people see Karl Lagerfeld with a guitar and he's barely jumping 1.5 inches from the ground, or maybe they did Photoshop, they photoshopped him or something. Maybe he's not jumping at all. And then you have this word, they're carrying him. And I don't know if he can play guitar with all of the rings that he has on his hands. Maybe he's playing slide guitar. Maybe Ry Cooder, maybe he's having a jam with Ry Cooder or something like that. So as you see, there is written music, very big. And then when you open this issue, well, you get your standard nice. This is a men's issue, right? You get a lot of nice boys, and who are dressed in all the fancy clothes, super cool, super relaxed, and everything. And you get your load of. There's a very good interview with Brian Eno as well in this issue. But it's in French, so I didn't bring it. So, which brings me to the streaming bit. So, to the guys who are on the stream, this is for you, is it's a consideration with global transmissions being what they are today. I could easily have an eye on the previous lectures that happened in the same space. It's not teleportation yet, like in Star Trek, but in some kind of strange way it is. So as travel has lost its romantic aura, poetic dimension, and ultimately its thrill, with planes become buses, watching stream video with a small moving image with a mono sound on the other side of the planet is an intriguing and beautiful experience. Like the first film ever made with the train coming into the station. So this thrill of a new way to interconnect is always exciting. What is less exciting is when it becomes banal and daily, like these crowded planes where you travel like human cattle, except if you're in business class. That's why he doesn't travel. This analogy may seem easy, but it is one that profoundly interests me. Okay, back to quotes. A torrent of CDs and MP3s floods over systems of marketing and distribution already on the verge of collapse. Then the next one. In the past, trying to listen to everything has almost destroyed my desire to listen to anything. That's a very important statement. And I think a lot of us know that with our iPods. We're just flabbergasted. We're just out there cramming the thing up. You know, what's his name? Steve Jobs is like, he's going to sell us, the billionth whatever song, and you're going to be an old man and carrying your iPod, and it's going to become like a drama to even go out with your thing or your memory chip, because you're going to have so much music, you won't be able to move anymore. But you won't be able to listen to anything because you will not know what to listen to, because you're just going to be overloaded. And the third one, as we move through a period of intense, unsettling, and very rapid change, many musicians, composers, and sound artists respond by exploring subtle and subliminal characteristics of the physical environment or the almost supernatural communications that can occur in musical dialogue. So this comes from the book by David Toop, great book. So to the people who haven't read it, you can get this one. It's easy to find, and you should definitely read it, and the other ones before. One which is called Exotica, I think, and the other one which is called Ocean of Sound. So, back to QuickTime. Oh, slow time. Do you prefer slow time or QuickTime? So, So, let me see if I got this right. No. Let me just do it this way. Do it the magician's way. Okay. So this was a Christian Markley video that I filmed at the Barbican Centre in London, where he had a major retrospective of his work, and it was quite interesting. I talked with him afterwards about this and about this work. It's actually 4 screens. You can't see it here. It's very, very big, and it's playing continuously. So I think this is a very good sort of demonstration of the confusion point, or not being, or what David Toop said in the past, trying to listen to everything has almost destroyed my desire to listen to anything. It symbolizes that quite well. Naturally, it works much better in the real space because you have the magnitude of the screens were approximately this size. So you can imagine these 4 things. So he has these groups of sound events and musicians that come up. Some of them are dislocated and some of them come in big sort of synchronous moments. Okay. So how are we doing out there? Fine? Everybody's happy it's still raining outside? You got to call the rain doctor. So we're going to play some music now from a CD. Okay.
Welcome to Silent Sound Systems Subliminal CD, Mommy and I Are One.
Okay.
The track you're about to hear contains 35 messages that are cross-modulated with frequencies in the near ultrasonic range. The slight hissing you might detect is normal for its operation. This indicates that the sound is focused correctly, bypassing all conscious listening so that your subconscious mind can receive the messages. It is recommended to engage the repeat function on your CD player so that track 2 loops endlessly. This will ensure hours of enjoyment and emphasize the subliminal effect. Your disc has been specially programmed for your subconscious listening enjoyment, so sit back, relax, and listen.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to bring the volume up. This is an American artist, sound artist, who lives in in Holland and works there. His name is Mark Bain. And he works a lot with sound and architecture and how sound and architecture interact together. Works with a lot of things quite profoundly on that level. So I'm just going to play a bit of the piece, and watch out for your ears because it's just a very high frequency. Okay, I'm going to bring it up slowly. Can you hear it? Is that too loud? Okay. I'll bring it up a bit more. Can you talk a bit more? Or can you tell me, because I can't hear you. So, actually, it's a little. This is one of his works. I'll come back to this one. So, what we're listening to now is this. Mommy and I Are One. Okay. So, there's only 2 tracks. It's a mini CD. It's not a regular. It's not a 12-inch or whatever they call it. The first piece was called where he's speaking and explaining what the piece does. It's a well-documented string of words used in research to study the effectiveness of subliminal messages. Okay? And the second one that we're listening to now is Ana Architecture from 1999. And it's made in that way sort of that it sort of really penetrates your body and your living space in a totally different way. And in that same way he works with buildings. He gets his sounds to resonate, and he works with the materials. And sometimes it can be like very, very dangerous. So he refers to himself as an anti-architect. He works with, investigates our perception of space and sound, questioning the architectural authority that is appealed to in presenting art. In many of the works he generates an earthly awareness, while at the same time subtly revealing the fragility of our own inner stability, and so forth. So there's another artist who works in the same field, but who's Austrian. So we're still in European sound art. And his name is Franz Pomazel. So let me just get back. This is another piece from 2000 by Mark Bain, which is called Wavefront Fort Lux 2000. And I think it works quite well in the environment. Okay, so it's interesting that we go from one artist who's they're doing the same type of work. Obviously, these are not their only CDs, but you can see I'm also very interested in the way that artists decide how do they present their work, sound artists present their work visually. And I'm always intrigued by that. And that's why I like to present the records that you usually put into the record player and you never look at, or you just look at it when you unwrap the stuff and then forget about it. Or if you're looking for it, you know that there was some kind of funny sort of thing on top, but you never really sort of think about what's the connection between the sound part. And I think both of them work quite well. There's an intricate sort of connection with what we heard and what is on the record itself. So this is the Franz Pomazel CD, and I will play that if Donna is around to help me with this. Okay, I brought the number 3 back to. Oops. Oops. No, this is number 2, I think. No, that's. Whoops. Whoa. You don't have numbers on it? Okay. Huh? Is this okay? Is that what you...
Yeah, it's better if it's close.
Okay, go ahead. Okay. So let me just see. Okay, well you got the idea of how this sounds. Can you just play the next track to be sure that we're right on? Yeah, that's good. Can you pause it, please? Okay. So that was Franz Pomazel with a beautiful sound. It's a bit the same kind of stuff that we heard before with that like frequency stuff, but this was more, it was easier to listen to. And both of these, this is actually the original record and the remixed version. So you really have to have a lot of courage to go through these 2 hours from top to bottom to listen to this stuff. Yeah, I forgot. When he was at the Sonar Festival a few years back in 2002, there was a part of the Sonar Festival which is, I don't know if you know about this festival. It's really a major festival, and it was small, and now it became like a really, really big thing. They have a lot of artists, famous artists, and so forth. But they have as well a whole part which is connected to sound art, which is called Sonorama, and they invite every year, a lot of interesting people. And that year, when they invited him, he had one of his sort of structure moving pieces that he invested in this building. And actually, as soon as he started, the first day when he did his work, and the authorities that were there, they more or less, like in the hour after, they closed down the place because they thought that the building was going to collapse. And he was really unhappy because these people work with a lot with the resonances, with these sensors and stuff that they put in specific places. They do their calculations and so forth. And in order to get the whole building vibrating, you can imagine what kind of stuff you have to go through. So he was like, quite, not to use the P off, okay? So he's doing quite a lot of radical stuff, and he did a piece for the Kunstradio in 1999 called Air Cra, which is air crash, where he did a lot of work with sounds with airplanes crashing, quite heavy stuff. So we're staying in this relationship between buildings and sound. So there's this English magazine that is quite difficult to get hold of, and I'm happy to thank Rama Kazam, who is actually the editor of these 2 issues that I will show you. They were specifically connected to architecture and sound that investigate deeply the relationship between sound, space, music, and architecture. And they include very interesting articles such as Headspaces by Bernhard Leitner, an Austrian, very interesting person. I won't have time to go into him. Mark Bain, that we just heard about, Sonic Architectures, Causing Effects Between Sound and Its Source by Brandon LaBelle, who's a very famous artist and writer on sound, who lives, I think, here in LA, and who's done a lot of stuff. But he's yet again, very present in Europe, very connected to the European scene. So this bridge, or I don't think there's a bridge anymore. It's just happening all the time. So this magazine is quite interesting. And there was an interview with Bill Fontana, who was here. I think a very, very good interview with him as well. So it all reconnects in some kind of way. So that's issue 3. This is issue 4, which is, as you can see, the subtitle, Essays on Sound and Architecture, Time and Visibility number 2. And you can see that Bernard Tschumi, Marcos Novak, Yanis Xenakis, and Bill Fontana are the stars of this beautiful 3D nightmare cover. Okay? But the stuff inside is really good. I mean, I'm a bit critical of the cover because I'm not really into this kind of stuff, but so which leads me to say a word on the journal produced, because there's this whole community of people who are doing like a lot of you can see it, the Journal of the UK and Ireland Soundscape Community, December 2003. So the soundscape community is quite a prominent one. So, and they have and their journal, this other journal, is produced by the Forum of Acoustic Ecology called Soundscape. So boom, here we go. The Journal of Acoustic Ecology. And as they say themselves, the publication seeks to balance its content between scholarly writings, research, and active engagement in current soundscape issues, as mentioned in the header. So what do you find inside? Well, in issue number 5, we have 2 texts by sound artists Christina Kubic, writing about digital art's black sheep, and Bill Fontana, yet again, on musical information networks. Both of these magazines are interesting because they deal with very specific topics seen through the sound perspective. And these are the kind of magazines that are really important because they really they really focus, and they go into microscopic lengths of going into the thing, not just being, as I was saying in the beginning, the sound as the spice or the orphan of all of these other forms of arts that are out there running around. So just that you see yet again the way that they present their visual side of sound, always interesting. This is Bill Fontana when he did his installation in Venice at the Biennale. I quite like this picture because it's got a bit of a fashion element in it. And I think there's one more. Yeah, this one is more like a Zen-oriented one. So there's this Electronic Music Foundation in New York that just organized a festival of music, sound, and ecology called An Ear to the Earth, with installations, encounters, and sound walks. So it's a nice site to check out as well. They do a lot of very interesting work. If you don't know them, check them out. EMF, Electronic Music Foundation. So I have brought here a couple of things that I forgot about. I hope there won't be feedback. Let's see. Ooh, where's the feedback? Let me see. There was something I brought over for you guys here. Let me see. Well, it doesn't seem to be here. Funnily enough. Well, anyway, they're connected. I wanted to show you just a paper. They're connected with the GRM in Paris, and they distribute their software. So that's another way of the way these communities work together. The guys in Paris are doing their software. The guys in EMF are doing these kind of things like ecological soundscape stuff, but at the same time they distribute the software. So it's not only a theoretical thing of just talking about how the planet needs to go through this and that, or they're like real connections on real topics and on real things. So there is an increasing awareness on sound pollution questions, that sound being a fairly free-flowing material, no matter the technological advances on containing it, I still believe we need to triple our efforts in order to make our city symphonies sound better. I was at the store right around the corner here this morning called Ralph's or something, this like mega big store, or next door Best Buy or something like that. And I walked into this place and it was just like, it was like this whole humming thing was happening with all this air conditioning going on. And I was just thinking about the people who were designing these systems and how do they deal with this stuff, and why don't they get someone on the job maybe that if this has to happen all day, why doesn't it happen in some kind of melodic way? Why doesn't the air go through certain things that the people who work there that could hear maybe the sound in a different way? It's and everybody's like in this fog of sound. But as nobody has any kind of education on this level, nobody cares about it. So people are just like mutants going through this thing. And I think that their quality of life and their quality of well-being would be very much enhanced if if somebody thought about these things. Okay, Don, can we play the next track while we watch this? So we're going into a nicer mode here. This is okay. What time? What time is it? So this was called Unidentified Pair of Birds, and it comes from these compilations called Vibro, and I can hand them out to you so you can look the way they look, and actually the one that we were just playing with comes from the first one, so you can at the same time, I don't know if you can see anything here, or you want to look at it afterwards. Huh? Afterwards is better, okay. So I'm going to speed up a bit because everybody's going to fall asleep after. Okay, so while we were hearing that, we were watching this, and we were watching here while we were listening to that, okay? And this guy, as you saw, his name is Maurizio Nanucci, who is an Italian artist, very interesting guy who works with neon, but also does a lot of stuff with sound, often like silent pieces. So these were like very big. At the art fair in Paris, he had this big sign that was just there, smack in the middle here. Okay, can I play the next one? So this next track is called Somewhere Between Superscription and Depopulation.
Porque el pueblo, que todo el mundo lo quiere. Porque a mí me parece que este rincón es el más bonito.
So we're still in nature here, as we were before, but the nature kind of wall. How do I speed this up? Yeah, can you go fast forward? Like 2:30. Yeah, okay. Let's check it there. So it started out quite normal and now it's going to get weird. Nature's going to become a bit strange. So I'll leave it in the background. Whoops. I'll tell you from what record that comes from. I just want to finish with the sort of healing bit. Very briefly on sound healing. It's a whole domain that needs to be worked on and rediscovered through ancestral techniques, as for example the very precise use of the gong in Kundalini yoga, or what Tomatis in Paris does with his machine called the electronic ear, where he can heal certain language and psychic misfunctions. So here we are in the therapy zone of sound. So this is a collective of artists. Wow, that was very nice. Very cool. Is that Brazil calling? No? Yeah? Or Mexico, maybe. Don, can you, is it paused? Yeah, so, okay, thanks. So this is a Stahlplatt sound system. So the healing bit is important with sound, okay? And so I'm not going to go into it for a long time. So these guys are taking it to a more sort of, you'll see on an easier scale. Since the early 80s, the Dutch Stahlplatt, a very interesting collective with a fair amount of activities going from record label, radio programming, distribution, e-zines, audio galleries, to a full sound art program founded by Gert-Jan Hobin, I hope that's right, in 2000, and in 2000 the Stahlplatt sound system. There is an audio installation called the Ultrasound, as you saw before, of therapy by the Stahlplatt sound system, premiered in Ljubljana in Slovenia during the cycle of sound events called Bitshift, presented at the gallery Kapelica, which deals on an arty level with the healing side of the sound subject. So I will just read very quickly what they said about this, because I think they put it quite well into words. The text was much longer, so I'll just brief you in on this very quickly. The ultrasound of therapy is a sound installation inspired by the 18th century French hospital La Salle des Malades. Visitors are invited to undergo a personal sound therapy and are treated with sound therapy selected to provide individualized sonic experiences. These sound therapies are created by the members of Stahlplatt Sound System, as well as Simon Wickham Smith, Lynn Pock, and Biotechnology Makes Business Consultancy. Intake is the first step in this self-declared curative process, transforming an onlooker into a patient. A doctor interviews the patient and enters data including name, address, date of birth, profession, relevant habits, etc. into the patient's personal file. A diagnosis involving the selection of an appropriate sound therapy is made, and the patient is placed in or strapped onto a hospital bed and visually isolated by hospital curtains. Each sound therapy varies in time and audio content to suit the individual patient. Some therapies are relaxing, others energizing, still others disturbing. The sound therapy is transmitted through radios mounted into treatment room, to speakers placed in the room, and to bass shakers mounted under the beds. The various therapies are simultaneously audible outside the therapy rooms, combining to create an unorchestrated sound filling the installation space. Each patient, look at them, is invited to write down comments and responses to their therapy experiences on a form after being discharged. A selection of these comments will be posted on the Stahlplatt Sound System and Open Studio Project websites and presented according to the sound therapy undergone by each patient. So here you got an idea of what's happening with these guys. They're really strapped in there. I didn't do this, so I can't tell you.
Is this vibration
I think so. I think so. See? No, I never tried it because I couldn't go. So another interesting, well, this is the track that we heard before, the nature becoming weird all of a sudden. We naturally didn't listen to the whole track, but it comes from this project, an interesting installation called Audiolab, done in France, which has 3 versions, done in 2001, 02 and 03, was a commission from La Caisse des Dépôts, which helps to promote contemporary creation, and was curated by Hervé Mikhailov and Jean-Yves Leloup. They worked with various designers, Patrick Jouin, Ronan Erwan Borolek, and Laurent Massalou, who build every year a different sound object. So here are the sound objects, okay? They also asked a number of artists to do specific tracks, and they made a CD, which you just saw before, and you will see it afterwards because I got it here. I'd like you to see how it's made and how they did the design around it. And it's built like Sound Rain, or what I would call Sound Sun. You get your sound tan or your sound shower, and off you go. See? These modules are now and permanently in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in Luxembourg, Le Grand Duc Jean, which actually helped make these things. So as you can see here, this is where the sound comes from. That's the shower bit, and this is the intelligence bit here with all of the programming and stuff. So people can walk around, sit down, lay down on the little cushions in space. And then there was a third one which was like this, with the sound coming from above, and the intelligent unit in the middle there. So how are we doing with time, Victoria? Totally. Okay, so do you want me to do it really quickly? Okay, this is another artist from France called Alexandre Périgot, who did this interesting work. I will quote him. And he says, "Is there nothing else left but the houses of stars to make us dream? It is the apotheosis of the American dream of the moment where the house becomes the ultimate vehicle of realization of happiness, thanks to the worship of entertainment." So this is called the House of Elvis. He actually built the House of Elvis. And he, as you can see on these pictures, he took it to Thailand, where he made it in bamboo, and then he took it to the south of France, and he took it, and he has concerts in there with guys playing, and then he brought it back to Paris. So you can see, if some of you know the La Grande Villette, this nice building here in the back, so you can see how big this thing is in the back. Another shot of him. So, digitalism. Okay, so I need to just get this DVD here. Yeah. Whoops. So I actually like this word because it's a band, it's a young band who's yet again another band who's mixed with fashion and with sound and with design and with t-shirts and internet and the whole thing. They're just into the whole thing. And I will just play you briefly. So we need to play a thing called Sweetheart. So it's granular synthesis. It's an Austrian outfit that's not working together anymore. So I'd just like to play the sweet, but we need some volume. Here we go. So this is an older piece, but I really like it. And so this goes on. It's not very long. It goes on for a little bit, and I really like this piece because it's really for me it's like digitalism. I don't know why, but I really think it epitomizes quite well what we just saw. It's got that inherent digital quality in really the most noble sense of that word. It's very microscopic because it's obviously on a very granular and on a very sort of nano level that this stuff is happening on those really micro edits and the way this whole thing works. But I think you can really see, as Brian Eno used to say, that there's a lot of poetry when you have something simple and when you have something strong like that. You can really touch upon. You don't need to have like multi-million dollars to do sometimes you need multi-million dollars to do very simple things, but sometimes, well, maybe this costs a lot of money, I don't know. That's a whole other problem. So we're back into the old painting stuff. I'm just going to quote a person here very quickly. So I just want to read you something that I really like and that I heard on the radio a couple of years ago and that pops up in my mind every time. And it's about an ethnomusicologist, I don't know if I say that right, team who went into the deepest of Africa to do their research. During their recording sessions, the local tribe were asked to perform their sounds, which they did, and at the end of the take, they were asked to play it again. They re-performed. And when they finished, the man in charge said to the translator to tell them not to play another piece, and they replied that they just played the same piece again. So actually, for them, it was totally normal of playing something different, which was exactly the same thing. So I'm going to skip some bits here and come to Michel Chion. I'm just going to quote him very briefly.
Is this the most recent quote by Michel Chion? Is this the most recent quote?
No, unfortunately not. This is a very not well-known book by him, and he was quite sad when I talked to him a few years back. He saw his book, sold for nothing in one of those what are they called, thrift shops or bargains. When the whole stack arrives, and he bought a load of them for nothing. And every time I see them, I buy them when they come up, and I give them to friends, because I think this book should really be translated into English, because what he does in this book is get it briefly, the history of sound is intricately mixed with technological advances, but curiously the vocabulary that classifies and defines audio experiences is quite poor. We have a lack of accurate terminology in sound. So this book deals with this, and so I will quote just Michel Chion from the beginning of the book. So he says, "We all live with sounds. They accommodate us in the profound night. They bother us, but also alert us. They aggress us, but sometimes they lead us to the sky. They orient and disorient us. And here is what we do with them. We neglect them, we circumvent them, and we only talk about their source or on their effect on us, in which we envelop ourselves narcissistically. Their nature, their being are rejected by us in indifference and forgetfulness, so that we keep it away." So Michel Chion, for those who don't know, is a composer, a writer, theory, music, film, and he's done some really nice records and very good books. Researcher, has written a book called Le Promeneur Écoutant that I translated very sort of lightly, The Walking Listener, and which is essays in ecology, which links the word to listen and logos, which is a neologism, a new word pinned down by Pierre Schaeffer, father of musique concrète, in his seminal work on the Traité des musées musicaux. I won't go into that, that's too complicated, which Chion updated to envisage a discipline, so I'm quoting him again, a discipline that would deal in rigorous words and concepts on sounds and what we hear under all circumstances. For example, I'm just taking one of the concepts that he develops in this book, which is, for example, what he calls the sound point, a sound point would be what I just said before, this horrible air conditioning system that's playing right next door here all day long. So this is a sound point. This is definitely a sound point, but we don't refer to it as a sound point. We just call it the air conditioning, or we don't even hear it because we don't want to hear it. But if we had this ability and this know-how and this sort of faculty to think about it in those terms, maybe we could progress this whole environment. So he uses the source point as a fountain, for example, or a stream in the mountains, which is a source point, which continuously emanates sound. Okay, so some new pictures. Very briefly, this is a young artist called Emmanuel Lagarrigue, and this was exposed in the Gallery Anne Barrault in Paris. And this is a sound piece, as you can see, a circular sound piece with teeny weeny little loudspeakers hanging around. So what you do is you go inside, and that's where it happens. The little sounds fly around you, and it's quite nice when you're in there, but the woman who works there was a bit fed up of listening to the sound all day long. So yet again, even though it's a thought out process, even though it's an artistic process, and it doesn't mean that this factor of how you cohabit with the sound during all day needs to be addressed. But anyway, what was heard inside was very, as you can see, a lot of artists use these speakers, like Brandon LaBelle, Robin Minard. There's loads of people. It's become like one of the standard things of having these little speakers in installations. So the girl is inside, she's listening, and she's going out. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to finish with just a little overview with the French, or how I put it, what's happening in you've seen certain elements of the French sound art scene, but let's say that's why I mixed on purpose I mixed the mumbo jumbo in English and in French, so we get this international feel, because it's sexy, as they say. So So j'aime le sound, jamais le sound, voilà le sound. The French sound art scene is very vital these days and is gathering momentum, though it has a fragmented quality. It breeds diversity over a broad age spectrum that incorporates old figures in a fresh light. So let me just see if I have my friend Pierre-Henri here. No, I will show you that quickly afterwards. So let me go back here. It breeds diversity over a broad age spectrum that incorporates old figures in a fresh light, be it Henri Chopin, who by the way lives in England, or Pierre-Henri, who is one of the founding fathers of musique concrète, to mention Luc Ferrari, who recently passed away, and is one of the rare areas in the dismantling social structure of French society where being old doesn't matter, because you have to be young and be cool in order to go forward. Whereas in this domain, funnily enough, people really want to sort of interact with old people, which is a surprise. This vitality may be explained by various factors which are more or less the same for the whole of Western Europe, and obviously varying details from country to country or from place to place. So I'm just going to go through the list of, in no special order, the advent of why this domain is happening and why it is vital, it has a vitality. So the advent of cheap and easy to use sound technology, the democratizing of the creative and artistic processes, cutting loose from centralized structures, very short underground periods, and very quickly moving overground. That's a very important point, but there's no underground anymore, where underground is like a finished thing. The way digital media and media arts are taught now in universities, the internet, peer-to-peer, tons of independent labels and new magazines, from the iPod to the cell phone and ringtone mentality, video game mentality, sound design and cinema, fashion and design, and an ongoing nostalgia for the good old pop and rock icons. So that's what we have here. As you see Johnny Cash here, who's a bit muddled up. Nostalgia for the good old pop and rock items, be it their equipment or the groups themselves, and the kind of weird appropriation like the Andy Warhol syndrome still lingers on. The advent of festivals all over the world needing new faces from far away, the impact of black music not only on a musical level but also on a social awareness level, which brought back to certain white kids a kind of apprehension of the world, and the whole respect attitude, which unfortunately doesn't always give good and great results. The disengagement from any political consciousness, with more of an attitude, whatever happens, we'll do our own thing, new drugs, etc. Maybe the specific French elements are a synchronicity of a few factors, like the arrival on the music scene of the so-called French touch, Daft Punk, Air, and many others. Also the opening up of institutions like the GRM and IRCAM, the quotas imposed for airplay of more French music, and the art world that's always looking for something new. Certain governmental structures were also pivotal in giving money to project and sound art projects that could see the day of light, new art spaces opening, etc. So the last thing I want to say is that I want to mention these two magazines that clicks and cuts. So this was Video Killed the Radio Star #1. As you can see, there is that's me doing that. That was very nice. Okay. This was a film by Thierry Jousse where he was using musicians and sound artists, had quite a classical French sort of, relationship thing going on, what I would call a kitchen film, because most of it happens in a kitchen atmosphere. And there was this other project called Sonic Mutations 2 years ago, not 2 years ago, which was in 2001, curated by Hans Ulrich Obrist, and another cooperative run by a guy called Jérôme Notinger, and who did this thing for an Austrian label called Mego, Quintet Avant. They work a lot with concrete, like the old concrete guys with tape. As you see, they all got Revoxes on them there. Another artist, Samon Takashi, who's been doing stuff like, which looks a bit like old stuff, but this is like a bird made out of, like a chicken made out of microphones and a headset. And so here we are at the end with this magazine called Eratum, that I have the last issue here that I will show you afterwards, and which is, they call it self-penned sound review, and these are the La Petites, the lap petites, La Petites with a major figure here, Eliane Radig, who's one of the older ones, like I was saying. So we can see that they've incorporated. There's no age barrier happening here. The three girls and her, they're having a good time. Very nice record, minimal, but it's quite interesting. And to finish off with the Vibro Sound Art magazine, which is wow, how did I do that? It's really strange stuff. It's vibrating. Vibro makes me vibrate. So this is, it started out in 2004. Is that Dawn doing playing some fun? Ah, it's the ghost in the machine. Ah, we like that. That's very good. That's very good. So I contributed to one of these, the number 2 here, and I actually contribute with these people. I work with them because I think they're doing some really good work. And it's done in France, but it's a totally sort of international thing. And they play and choose known people. Is this the joke for the?
No, wait, it's mysterious.
I can do it too. I can do my Bob Wilson letter to Queen Victoria. I don't know if anybody knows that piece. When he was doing all of He's getting aggressive now, huh? He wants me to stop, no? Huh? Is this going to be streamed? All of this? Is this going to be streamed? So maybe we can do something together. Can you hear me? Are you there? Okay, boogie woogie. So let's wrap it up. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for letting me go overboard.
Want to ask a question?
No, everybody wants to go home, I think.